Welcome to part 2 of the tables tutorial. If you have not watched part 1 that discusses static, dynamic, and layout tables, follow the link in the description. Let's talk about reference tables. This table type allows users to reference data that's on a subform table in the same form as the reference table or from another form in the same form list. This allows users to perform various computations on that data on the reference table or on the form by using the data on the reference table. To add a reference table to a form, go to the form editor and click on the reference table. Name the reference table from here, and then select the subform, table, or form you want to use for your reference table here. You can choose to set a filter condition for the kinds of matching data points you want to be returned from the chosen subform, form, or table. You can define the columns on the table by clicking on the column node and adding the questions and their labels. You can also define the width of any column on the Advanced tab of each question added. Calculated values will be used to display the data of the selected form, subform, or table. The count of matching data points retrieved will determine how many rows the reference table has. Referencing another form. You start by selecting the other form from the Select Reference Form or Table field. To reference fields in the other form on calculated values or filter conditions for the reference table, you must go and add a reference name to the other form you are referring to, because its reference is empty by default. Then you use the following syntax: _form reference.field reference. To set a condition that compares fields from the form containing the reference table against those the referenced form, simply invoke its fields directly using the syntax _field reference. Let's go through some examples to illustrate the concept. Assume you have two forms. One form was used to collect data for a guardian and their child, and you want to display some data about the children in a reference table in another form for students. We will start by adding a reference name to the guardian's form. Let's call it Guardian and save. Then we can go to our student's form, and if we want to display the children's names, we add a calculated value field and define its calculated statement as _guardian.name. Guardian is the reference name of the form with the guardian and their child's information. Name is the reference name for the field where the child's name is entered. We can replicate this for other fields on the guardian form, such as age and gender. Then save the changes. We can also add a field to fill in against the referenced information. If we go to the Data Viewer, click Add and select the student form, you can see that the data filled in on Guardian forms is displayed on the reference table on the student form. Each row of the reference table corresponds to a data point belonging to the Guardian form. If no filter condition is set, all data points that have been added to the Guardian form at that point in time are displayed on the reference table. If you want to filter out which data points of the Guardian form are displayed on our reference table, we will use the filter condition on the reference table. We can set a condition that compares values from only the Guardian form, e.g., _guardian.cclass == to class 2, to only show data points where the class of the child was recorded as class 2, or _guardian.age == to 6, to only show data points where the age of the child was recorded as 6. Or you can also use a condition like underscore guardian.cclass equals to class 2, and an underscore guardian.age equals to 6 to only show data points where the child's class was class 2 and their age was 6 conditions. We can also set a condition that compares values from the guardian form and those on the student form, e.g. underscore guardian.cclass equals underscore sclass, which compares the class entered on the guardian form for a child and the class entered on the student form. You will have to save the student form's data point first to have the reference table populated with the matching data points. Referencing a subform in the same form as the reference table. You start by selecting the subform from the Select Reference Form or Table field. To reference fields in the subform on calculated values in the columns of the reference table, you have to add a reference name to the subform, as it is usually empty by default. Then use the following syntax: underscore subform reference name dot field reference. To refer to field in the subform in the filter condition, just use underscore field reference. To refer to a value in the parent form of the subform, when comparing it to subform fields on the filter condition, add the prefix underscore parent to the field's reference name, i.e. underscore parent dot field reference. To illustrate these concepts, we can use some examples. We have a student form that has a subforms where average class marks for a given exam period are recorded. If we want to display the subform's data on a reference table in its parent form, we shall create a reference table and select the marks subform as the reference form. Give it a reference name marks. Then add the fields we want displayed from the subforms as calculated values. E.g., to display the subject, we will have the calculated statement as underscore marks.subjects. To display the subject average, we will have the calculated statement as underscore marks.average. To display the subject's teacher, we will have the calculated statement as underscore marks.teacher. To display the exam period, we will have the calculated statement as underscore marks.period. If we go to the data viewer, click Add, select the student form, and add some data to its marked subforms, then click Save. You will see that for each subform added, a row containing the data we displayed using calculated values is displayed. If we want to filter out which subforms to display comparing only data from the subform, we will use the filter condition on the reference table, e.g. underscore period equals to February midterms, which will display only subforms where the exam period was recorded as February midterms. Or underscore subject dot index of 001, exclamation mark equals -1, which will display only subforms where the subject was recorded as math on the subject choice options. You can also combine both conditions, underscore dot period equals February midterms, and subject index of 001 equals -1 to return subforms where the exam period was February midterms and the subject was math. We can also set a filter condition that compares some value on the subform to a value on its parent form, e.g. underscore teacher equals underscore parent.cteacher. This will display Mark's subform data where the subject teacher recorded on the subform matches the one marked as the class teacher on its parent form. To make it easy to view the subforms referenced on the reference table, enable the option Show Link to Referenced Subform. This will add a column on the reference table called Reference Subform, which contains links to the reference subform. You can click to view the subform. Referencing a table in the same form as the reference table, you start by selecting the table from the Select Reference Form or Table field. Then to reference fields in the table on calculated values or filter conditions for the reference table, you use the following syntax: underscore table, reference.field, reference. To use table values on the filter conditions for the reference table, use the syntax underscore field reference, where the field reference is the reference name of the column on the table. Referencing fields in the reference table in the main form. To reference fields in the reference table, define calculation statements in the main form with the syntax underscore table reference name dot field reference. More information about reference forms. If we define a calculated value that uses one of the fields in the reference table's columns as references, and it is outside of the reference table, just like in the static table example, the statement will sum the values for all rows of the selected column if the field type for the column was numeric, i.e., an integer or a real number or numeric calculated value. If the values are string values, a string consisting of the found strings separated by commas is formed. There is also a setting for reference tables called Include Action per Row. Enabling this will add the following columns and fields to your reference table: action status, action plan, plan date, closure date. You can mark them as not in use and keep the action fields you want. This setting allows the reference table to collect the findings of audits that require corrective actions, with each representing a find. Each finding corresponds to an audit question, which typically is implemented as a subform. The setting will activate a transmit button to share the reference table using email. Thank you for watching part 2 of our tables tutorial. If you have further questions, contact us at support@poimapper.com.